Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn Texas rancher clashes with a power-hungry HOA queen, sparks fly, fences hold, and the war for the land begins. What starts with snide remarks and petty flyers erupts into sabotage, lawsuits, and one hell of a showdown. This isn't just about property, it's about pride. They say the best defense is a good fence. I say the best defense is 120 acres of hard-earned dirt, 4 generations of sweat, and a damn good understanding of Texas land law. I'm Travis Hall. I'm 42 years old, a third-generation rancher, and I've lived on this piece of earth my entire life. My granddad broke this land in 1928 with little more than a shovel, a mule, and a spine made of iron. I run beef cattle, hens, a few hogs, and some cornfields out by the East Ridge. Got 3 working wells, full irrigation, a mechanical workshop, grain silos, and 2 barns older than half the folks around here. This land isn't part of any HOA, never has been, never will be. It's mine, legally, historically, and down to the last fence post. I don't socialize much with the new folks over in the Cottonwood Ranch HOA development. Don't hate them either. They keep their lawns short, kids wear bike helmets, and their dogs usually stay leashed. That's all I ask from neighbors. But every now and then, a particular type of suburban royalty moves in. One who thinks rules matter more than rights. One who smells hay once and calls it environmental hazard. That particular someone arrived 6 months ago in a pristine white Escalade with vanity plates and a realtor smile, Karen Lorraine Rivers. Karen wasn't subtle. Within 2 weeks of settling into her designer stucco 2-story, she'd declared herself HOA president and started sending out newsletters about neighborhood visual standards and preserving the serene integrity of Cottonwood Ranch. First time I saw her, she was walking a little Shih Tzu named Muffin in a rhinestone vest and sneering at my hay baler like it was a war crime. I nodded politely, tipped my hat, and kept walking. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The first signs were harmless. A letter from the county health inspector showed up in my mailbox, warning of anonymous reports concerning odor and animal welfare. I invited the inspector over myself. He poked around, drank my coffee, petted my dogs, and told me flat out, whoever sent that complaint's never been near a real farm in their life. Next came environmental services. Another anonymous complaint about groundwater contamination from untreated runoff. I let the county techs take all the soil and water samples they wanted. They left after 2 hours, baffled but smiling. Turns out my wells were cleaner than half the municipal lines in the county. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. One morning, I was out near the paddock repairing a busted sprinkler line when I heard someone approaching through the cedar brush along the east fence. Karen, wearing tennis whites and a disgusted look, stood just outside my property line like she was surveying enemy territory. "Mr. Hall," she called, not bothering with pleasantries. "We really need to have a conversation about the impact your operation is having on community cohesion." I stood up, turned the wrench in my hand slowly, and wiped the sweat off my neck. "Community cohesion," I repeated flatly. She motioned around with her hand as if gesturing to some invisible authority. The constant smell of manure, the animal noises, and the general rural aesthetic are affecting property values for our residents. I rested my boot on the pipe. "Ma'am, this is a working farm. It was here before your subdivision had plumbing. If you don't like the smell of cows, I recommend moving closer to town." She blinked at me like I'd just farted in church. "I'm trying to be civil," she said through clenched teeth, "but Cottonwood Ranch HOA has a long-term vision, and frankly, your property disrupts the uniformity." "Good," I said, turning back to the pipe. "Uniformity is what kills a country." She didn't say another word, just turned on her heel and walked back toward her Escalade, the dog's tiny paws kicking up gravel behind her. I figured that'd be the last of her little crusade. Again, I was wrong. A few days later, I got a visit from a man in a county windbreaker who asked, sheepishly, if I'd be open to voluntary annexation into the HOA. I laughed so hard I dropped my coffee. The answer, naturally, was hell no. That night, I reinforced my perimeter gates, double-checked my camera system, and reread my deed just for sport. Everything was in order, but I had the gut feeling that this wasn't over, not even close. It was just past 8 on a Friday morning when the peace shattered. I'd saddled up old Jess, my bay mare, and was leading her across the pasture for a mid-morning check on the south herd. The air still held that dew-soaked chill, and the only sound was hooves pressing into soft earth and the occasional low grunt of a lazy cow. Then I heard the tires. Not just one pair, multiple. Gravel crunching, engines idling, radios squawking. I looked up toward the main entrance and saw 5 black and white cruisers crawling up the driveway, lights spinning, but no sirens. A 6th unmarked SUV brought up the rear. All of them were county vehicles. Jess shifted under me. She didn't like tension, and neither did I. But I'd learned long ago not to show it. I turned her around, rode up to meet them just past the gate, and swung off before they could open their doors. As my boots hit the ground, I counted 10 officers. Full vests, sidearms, one with a rifle slung. The lead officer, a square-jawed man I recognized immediately, stepped forward. "Travis," he said, with that blend of familiarity and concern. "Sardant, Ben Rogers, County Sheriff's Office." "I know who you are, Ben," I said calmly. "What's this about?" He looked tired already. "We got a 911 call from a woman named Karen Rivers. She reported an aggressive armed male, multiple unsecured livestock, and a possible environmental hazard. Claimed the man was threatening HOA residents." I didn't blink. "Did she mention that this is private property and I've got every license known to man for what I do out here?" He gave me a look. "Not exactly." I took a step back, unlatched the gate with one hand, and gestured them in. "Y'all, come on. I've got coffee on the porch and every damn certificate laminated and alphabetized." Ben waved 2 of his deputies to follow, the rest staying with the cruisers. I walked them up the gravel path to the main house, Jess trailing loosely behind. The second we stepped onto the porch, I turned on the outside monitor and started bringing up feeds from my camera system. Barn doors, pasture gates, machinery sheds, perimeter fencing, all recorded in high definition. "Here," I said, tapping the screen. "That's from last night. That's this morning. Nothing illegal, nothing unsafe. No armed threats except for that over-under shotgun by the feed barn, which I'm licensed to carry. And before anyone says a word, I've got 3 active USDA contracts, 5 veterinary inspection logs, and a full insurance policy with 0 violations." I left the screen on loop and stepped inside for the files. When I came back out, Ben and his guys were already softening. "This place is cleaner than most hospitals," said the younger deputy, eyeing the concrete pad behind the chicken coop. I handed over the folders. "Every inspection report for the past 2 years. I've got quarterly soil analysis, too, if you want to get into it." Ben flipped through the pages, then looked up with a slow nod. "This is thorough. Travis, I don't see a single thing here that justifies what we were told." I folded my arms. "That's because Karen Rivers doesn't want the truth. She wants control. And I don't play by her HOA fantasy handbook." Ben glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "You know this smells like a false report. That's a criminal offense, especially with the resources it cost us." "I'm aware," I said. "That's why I'm not just letting it slide." Ben's mouth twisted a little. "Look, off the record, I went to high school with your older brother. I know your family. You've never caused a single problem in this county. I'll file the report as no actionable evidence and note the possibility of a false call. But you should know, she's not going to stop. People like her don't accept no." I exhaled slowly. "Then she's going to have to accept the consequences." They stayed another 20 minutes, asked a few formal questions, took some perimeter photos, and left without incident. I watched the cruisers disappear down the dusty road, then looked out at my fence line. Still standing. Still mine. I walked Jess back to the stable, patted her flank, and said out loud, "Round 1's done. But the war, that was just beginning." The first flyer showed up taped to the stop sign at the end of my driveway. Printed in bold red letters across the top, "Is your family safe?" Below that was a grainy low-res image of my barnyard, probably lifted from some zoomed-in cell phone camera with a circle drawn around a herd of pigs like it was a crime scene. At the bottom, in all caps, "Unregulated livestock operation threatens our neighborhood." I pulled it down, crumpled it, and took it back to the house. Figured it was a one-off, just another tantrum from Queen Karen. But the next day, I saw 3 more. One stapled to the bulletin board at the post office, one zip-tied to the HOA playground fence, and one fluttering on the windshield of my truck while I was filling feed barrels. It wasn't just flyers. Karen had gone full propaganda mode. Cottonwood Ranch residents got special updates in their mailboxes titled Community Risk Reports. She held an informal emergency meeting in the HOA clubhouse where, according to someone I trust, she stood up in front of 24 people and called me a hostile land baron with an antisocial disposition and armed intent. I was creating a hostile environment for families. I was refusing to meet the neighborhood halfway. I was jeopardizing the value and sanctity of the cottonwood ranch lifestyle. 1 week later, I lost 2 minor supply contracts, both local diners that had used my eggs and bacon for years. Their wording was polite, but the meaning was clear. The controversy was bad for their brand. That's when I knew we'd crossed the line from nuisance to financial warfare. Karen wasn't just trying to control me anymore. She was trying to destroy me. So I fought back. First, I contacted the Texas Agricultural Producers Alliance and requested a press interview. They sent out a local TV crew the same week. I walked them through the whole farm, start to finish, camera ready in my flannel, my work gloves, and with a fresh set of inspection reports. I spoke calmly, firmly, with no dramatics. I've lived and worked on this land my whole life, I told them on air. I provide food to this region. I follow the law. I respect my neighbors. But I will not be bullied off my own land by an HOA president with a God complex and a real estate license. The clip aired that Friday. It didn't go national, but around here, it spread like wildfire. That night at the feed store, I got 4 handshakes, 3 cases of beer, and 1 hug from a woman I didn't even recognize. People were paying attention now. Then I took it up another notch. I wrote an open letter, plain text, 1 page, nothing flowery. I posted it to my website, emailed it to local press, and had it printed in the county paper's Sunday edition. In it, I detailed the false 911 call, the failed attempts to rezone my land, the smear campaign with flyers and public meetings, the damage to my reputation and livelihood. I signed it, full name, with a scanned copy of my deed attached. Title, When Power Meets Property, Why I Won't Back Down. 2 days later, I got a call from a civil liberties attorney based in Austin. Said she'd read the letter, seen the news coverage, and was offering pro bono representation if I wanted to take legal action. I said yes. We started with a cease and desist against Karen and the HOA for defamation and interference with business relationships. It was firm, professional, and legally airtight. Then we filed a notice of intent. Not the full lawsuit yet, but a shot across the bow. A warning. Karen didn't take it well. She responded the only way she knew how, by organizing a full-on protest outside my gate. About 30 people showed up on a sunny Saturday morning with poster board signs that read, "No animal prisons," "Save our neighborhood," and "Farms belong in the country." A few shouted slogans. One guy in a backwards visor started chanting, move the moo," like it was some kind of HOA poetry slam. I didn't say a word. I walked down to the gate, opened it just far enough to slide through, and planted myself on my side of the fence line, boots planted in dry Texas clay. I pulled out my phone, recorded a short video of the crowd, and spoke directly into the camera. This is private land. These are paid protesters. And this is what happens when someone tries to erase 100 years of Texas ranching because they think it ruins the view from their porch swing. Then I called the sheriff's department. An hour later, 2 cruisers rolled up. Ben Rogers stepped out again, looking about as thrilled as a man stuck in HOA drama can look. He talked to the crowd, reminded them that trespassing on agricultural land was a Class B misdemeanor, and calmly asked everyone to leave. Most did. The few who didn't, well, they left after Ben mentioned he'd start collecting names and license plates for his report. That night, I looked out over my pasture with the moonlight cutting through the grass and thought, I didn't start this war, but I'll damn well finish it. I thought Karen couldn't stoop any lower. Turns out, I'd underestimated the depths she was willing to crawl through. 2 weeks after the protest, outside my gate fizzled into nothing more than a minor Facebook embarrassment. I got a certified letter from the county zoning board. That alone set off alarms. I hadn't filed anything with them in years. Inside was a formal notice. A proposal had been submitted to rezone my land from agricultural to residential mixed use. If it passed, I'd be forced to cease most of my operations. No livestock, no crop production, no commercial sales. In the eyes of the state, I'd become just another oversized backyard with a tractor problem. The name on the proposal, Cottonwood Ranch Homeowners Association, filed by Karen Lorraine Rivers. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the letter like it was written in a foreign language. It was bold even for her. And worse, it meant she was playing a long game now. She didn't just want me silenced. She wanted my land stripped of its legal backbone. It all hinged on one thing: a hearing with the county zoning board. If they voted yes, it wouldn't be immediate, but it would set the legal precedent in motion. I made a few calls. First to my attorney in Austin, then to a land rights lobbyist I knew from my co-op days, then to the local press. Within 48 hours, I had a plan. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in a beige building behind the county courthouse, the kind of place where terrible decisions get made over bad coffee and lukewarm muffins. Karen showed up wearing cream slacks, a silk blouse, and a smug smile you could spot through drywall. She brought along a small entourage of HOA board members and, I kid you not, a PowerPoint presentation titled Reclaiming Community Harmony. She talked about modern aesthetics, the need for residential continuity, public health risks, and my personal favorite, the psychological toll of livestock proximity on neighborhood children. I almost laughed out loud. Almost. But I kept my poker face. Then it was my turn. I stepped up. No slides, no entourage, just my boots, my belt buckle, and a binder full of documentation. I laid it all out. Maps showing the historical boundaries of my property, USDA certifications, tax documents showing my ag exemptions going back 25 years. I passed around a report from the Texas Farm Bureau on economic impact, showed how my farm directly supported 87 local jobs across suppliers, processors, and vendors. Then I spoke. I'm not here to make anyone uncomfortable, I said. But I'm also not here to apologize for running a legal business on land my grandfather cleared with a mule and sweat. This isn't about zoning. This is about a personal vendetta by a woman who doesn't like the smell of reality. I could feel the room shift. Even one of the board members leaned forward, clearly unimpressed by Karen's suburban utopia pitch. But it wasn't over yet. Right before they adjourned, a young man in the audience raised his hand. The chair recognized him, and he introduced himself as David Rosales, a junior member of the board and former real estate intern. I just want to go on the record, he said, that Mrs. Rivers was my supervisor at Clearline Realty before she moved to Cottonwood, and I'm deeply concerned that this zoning petition resembles something she used to call a push-out strategy. She mentioned trying this tactic before with rural properties near planned developments. Karen's face went pale. She stood up, stammering, trying to dismiss him as a disgruntled ex-employee, but the room had already turned. The board called for a vote. Unanimous rejection. The zoning proposal was denied without further review. Karen stormed out like a wind-up doll with a broken spring. I stayed behind, shook a few hands, and walked out into the Texas sun with dust on my boots and fire in my chest. But I wasn't just angry. I was inspired. That weekend, I sent out an open invitation through my co-op. Community cookout, and open ranch tour. All welcome, even HOA members if they can behave. Over 100 people showed up. I gave hay rides, let kids feed the calves, served pulled pork and iced tea under the pecan trees. I even let the local high school band play their off-key rendition of Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. It wasn't just a good day. It was a message. I'm not going anywhere. Let them come. Let them try. This land's mine. And no zoning trick or HOA witchcraft is going to change that. It was just after 2 in the morning when the alarm on the Southfield motion sensor tripped. I woke instantly. Years on a farm train your brain to recognize real trouble from a coyote or stray deer. This wasn't wildlife. This was heavier, slower, deliberate. I threw on jeans, boots, a flannel shirt, and grabbed the 308 from the safe. Not because I expected a shootout. I just wasn't about to walk onto my property blind. As I headed to the porch, I tapped the remote for the perimeter floodlights and checked the camera feeds on the tablet I kept by the door. One feed showed it clearly: a pickup truck, dark blue, backing down my tractor path with its headlights off. The driver killed the engine, stepped out, and dragged something heavy across the gravel toward the goat pen. I zoomed in. Even in grainy IR, it was unmistakable. A dead pig. Not one of mine. I muttered, "Son of a bitch," and moved fast. I got within view just as the man rolled the carcass toward the fence and tossed it over like he was dumping lawn clippings. I called out, "Hey!" He froze, turned, and ran, scrambled into the truck and peeled out, fishtailing down the trail in a cloud of dust and desperation. Too late. The rear plate was already recorded. The thermal cameras had his face. I had everything. I waited until the truck was out of range, then called the sheriff's office. When the dispatcher asked, "Is this a medical emergency?" I almost laughed. No, but it's about to be a legal one. 30 minutes later, 2 cruisers rolled up, one of them with Ben Rogers behind the wheel. He looked like I'd dragged him out of bed, but when I showed him the footage, his face went cold. "That's not just trespassing," he muttered. "That's biohazard tampering, agricultural sabotage." We walked down together to where the pig carcass lay. I'd already strung a tarp over it, left it untouched. Ben lifted the edge carefully. There were no tags, no ear markings, no brand, just an empty stomach, a bloated gut, and a wound on the leg that looked like it had been sustained post-mortem. "This was planted," I said flatly. Ben didn't argue. "We'll run DNA, test for diseases, track ownership." "But you said the camera got a license plate?" I showed him the frame, time-stamped, high resolution. He whistled. "Let me run it." He radioed dispatch. Less than 5 minutes later, it came back. Registered to a commercial hauling contractor out of Cedar Creek. That name made me pause. I'd seen it before. On the back of a landscaping truck inside Cottonwood Ranch, trimming hedges along the model homes. Ben noticed my expression. "You recognize it?" "They do all the groundskeeping for the HOA." He nodded slowly. "Then we've got something." By sunrise, the carcass had been bagged and hauled for testing. The sheriff's department logged the footage into evidence. Ben promised a detective would follow up directly. I spent the morning pressure washing the gravel path and spraying down the pig pen. The smell lingered, heavy and chemical. A pig that size doesn't rot quietly. What really got under my skin, though, wasn't the biological threat. It was the planning. Someone paid a man to haul a dead pig onto my property in the dead of night, toss it near my livestock, and vanish. And that someone knew what they were doing. This wasn't a tantrum anymore. This was strategy. So I played my next card. I forwarded the footage, cropped, time-stamped, labeled, to 3 news stations, the County Agricultural Commissioner and the Texas Department of Animal Health. And then I sat back and waited. By that afternoon, my phone lit up with calls, reporters, officials, one pissed-off supplier who wanted to know if my whole herd was contaminated, and one who said he'd double his orders next month just to spite the HOA. But the best call came from a paralegal at the county courthouse. She told my attorney that the hauling company was under investigation for illegal dumping contracts, and that they had a paper trail linking recent cash payments to Cottonwood Ranch HOA's discretionary budget. And whose signature authorized those payments? Karen Lorraine Rivers. Game on. I always figured if I ended up in court one day, it'd be over land rights, water access, or maybe a zoning war with some half-brained bureaucrat. I never imagined I'd be suing a homeowners association president for sabotage, fraud, and environmental tampering. But that's where we were. After the dead pig incident, my attorney, Ellen Cortez, out of Austin, stopped smiling altogether. She came up to the farm in jeans and boots, hair in a tight braid, carrying a satchel full of printed exhibits and a burner phone for media contact. "We're not just filing a claim," she said, setting her files down on my kitchen table. "We're going scorched earth." She filed a civil lawsuit in county court that same week. 3 separate causes of action. 1, defamation and business interference for the flyers, the protest, and the public campaign Karen led against me. 2, false reporting and emergency abuse for the 911 call that brought 5 cruisers onto my land without cause. 3, criminal conspiracy and property sabotage for the pig incident linked directly to a contractor the HOA hired with untraceable cash. We named 3 defendants, Karen Rivers, Cottonwood Ranch HOA as an organization, and the hauling contractor. The case was filed. The sheriff's office confirmed they were pursuing criminal charges separately. And thanks to the HOA's own sloppy bookkeeping, Ellen got her hands on invoice records showing payments to the contractor listed as unmarked waste removal as Project 808. Problem was, there was no Project 808 in the HOA's public budget. We cross-referenced the invoice dates with the night of the dead pig drop. Perfect match. Then the story broke. The local news station ran a 4-minute segment titled, "Farm Under Siege, HOA Sabotage Allegations Shake County." The footage included the thermal video of the pig dump, Ben Rogers' official statement confirming no wrongdoing on my part, and, most damning of all, the invoices with HOA letterhead and Karen's signature. Karen tried to deny it, of course. She issued a trembling press release through an HOA PR consultant blaming a rogue contractor, claiming she'd never authorized anything beyond general landscaping. But nobody bought it. Not the press, not the county, not her own board. I heard from one of the HOA treasurers off the record that several board members were demanding a vote to remove Karen as president and freeze spending until the investigation was complete. But Karen didn't go quietly. That weekend, she held a closed-door emergency HOA meeting, trying to rally her remaining supporters. Word got out fast. An anonymous resident leaked the meeting minutes to the press, and they were a goldmine. Karen was recorded referring to me as a hostile rural element and said, "We'll bury him in paperwork if we have to." Problem was, someone recorded that statement on their phone, audio and all. By Monday morning, my attorney had added it to the court filings as proof of malicious intent. That same afternoon, 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at my place, not to question me, but to let me know that the county prosecutor was opening a formal criminal case against Karen for false police reporting, tampering with evidence, conspiracy to commit environmental sabotage. She wasn't arrested yet, but the paperwork was moving fast. Meanwhile, public support for me exploded. I got letters from ranchers in other counties. A local feed supplier offered a discount on bulk grain. One of the HOA members, a retired teacher named Gail, even dropped off a peach cobbler with a note that said, "Kick her ass in court." I was more than ready to. Still, I didn't celebrate. Not yet. The fight was moving to the courtroom now, and I knew Karen wouldn't stop flailing until someone put her in cuffs. But at least now I had the high ground, and a damn good lawyer standing on it with me. The courtroom smelled like old paper, bad coffee, and anxiety. It was early April when the civil case finally hit the docket. Hall v. Rivers et al., County Superior Court. The room was packed. Local ranchers, press with cameras slung around their necks, even a couple of high school kids from a civics class in the back row. Front and center sat Karen Rivers in a navy blazer that couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. She didn't look like a suburban queen anymore. She looked like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Ellen sat next to me at the plaintiff's table, cool as a West Texas morning. She leaned over before the judge entered and whispered, "We've got her. Just don't react when she lies. Let her dig." And dig she did. Karen's attorney tried to paint her as a concerned citizen, overwhelmed by the burden of leadership and misinformed by others. Claimed the pig incident was a horrific coincidence, a rogue contractor misusing funds. Said the flyers were distributed by residents without Karen's knowledge. Blamed the protest on community frustration. I almost laughed out loud when she claimed the zoning petition was exploratory and not specifically targeting Mr. Hall. Ellen eviscerated them. She walked the jury through our case like she was peeling back the layers of a spoiled onion, one by one. The invoice trail connecting HOA discretionary funds to the contractor involved in the pig dump. The video footage of the truck with timestamps and license plates. The email from Karen recovered during discovery, instructing the treasurer to clear payments off the formal record, keep it internal. The audio recording from the HOA meeting, where Karen said she'd bury him in paperwork. The handwritten notes from one of her board members obtained via subpoena that included a list titled "Tactics to Force Relocation, Hall Property." Each piece landed like a nail into a coffin. But the breaking point came when the prosecutor's office introduced criminal evidence on the 3rd day of proceedings. Their investigation had found forged signatures on multiple resident complaints submitted to the zoning board. 4 of the names were of residents who'd moved out over a year ago. One was a man who had passed away. The courtroom went dead silent. Karen's face drained of color. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge waved it off. "Let it be entered. Continue." By then, the jury didn't need convincing. The question wasn't if she'd lose, it was how badly. Final verdict? Karen Rivers, liable on all counts. Cottonwood Ranch, HOA, found complicit in negligence and malicious interference. Damages awarded to me, $680,000, covering economic losses, reputational harm, attorney fees, and emotional distress. But the real blow came outside the civil court. Because less than 24 hours after the verdict, Karen was arrested, charged with filing a false police report, evidence tampering, fraudulent use of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit environmental sabotage, attempted coercion via municipal process. They walked her out of her own neighborhood in cuffs. 2 news crews were there. So were 3 HOA members, 1 clapping, the other 2 filming. The county revoked Cottonwood Ranch HOA's right to jurisdiction over adjacent private properties. They were fined by the Municipal Ethics Board for malicious overreach of authority. The board dissolved 6 weeks later, citing irreparable loss of community trust. And me. I kept working. The cows still needed feeding. The corn didn't care about civil trials, but I hung a new sign on my gate the morning after the arrest. Private property, not HOA land. Not ever. And just in case anyone missed the point, I ordered 20 t-shirts with the same phrase and passed them out for free at the feed store. The way I saw it, if you stand your ground long enough, even the biggest bullies eventually get hauled off by someone with a badge. A month after Karen's arrest, the farm was quieter than it had been in years. No more protesters at the gate. No more helicopters from the news trying to get drone footage of my pasture. No more letters from lawyers or zoning boards or anonymous HOA concerned citizens. Just the sounds of wind through the corn rows, the rhythmic groan of the irrigation pump, and the occasional disgruntled goat arguing with the chicken coop. I could finally breathe, but I didn't just want the noise gone. I wanted to make a point, so I planned something public, something loud in a different way. I called it the Community Farm Day. Sent out open invitations through the local co-op, posted flyers at feed stores and churches, and even got the county's agricultural extension office to help organize field tours and safety demos. When the day came, the turnout surprised even me. Over 300 people showed up. Families, kids, ranchers, reporters, and more than a few former HOA members who'd either resigned or moved since the scandal. I rented a couple of hay wagons, set up a barbecue pit, and turned the whole west pasture into a parking lot. We had booths from the local 4-H club, seed suppliers, even a beekeeper who did a live hive demo with a mesh cage. I walked people through every part of the farm, the rotating pastures, the water reclamation tanks, the heritage grain silo from my granddad's eyrie. Let the kids feed the goats. One little girl even asked if she could adopt one, and I nearly said yes, just for the joy on her face. At noon, I climbed onto the flatbed trailer and gave a short speech. Not about the lawsuit, not about Karen, not about winning, just about why the land matters. About how farming isn't a backdrop for suburban brochures. It's work, it's food, it's heritage, and about how no one, HOA or otherwise, gets to erase that because it doesn't match their vinyl-sided dream. The crowd clapped. A few people shouted thanks. One man raised his styrofoam plate and yelled, "This brisket tastes like justice." I grinned. It did. That night, as the last trucks rolled out and the sun dipped below the oaks, I walked the perimeter fence with a beer in hand and looked out over the land. Mine. Always had been. Always would be. But I still had one final move to make. A month prior, one of the houses on the very edge of Cottonwood Ranch went up for sale. It belonged to a guy who'd moved out quietly during the whole debacle, tired of the HOA politics and ready to live elsewhere. I contacted him directly. No agents, no middlemen. Told him I'd buy it in full, cash, under one condition. I get full rights to fence, restrict, and rezone the property however I saw fit. He agreed. So I bought it. And 2 weeks later, I installed 12 feet of wrought iron fencing, 3 surveillance cameras, and a custom metal sign bolted into a cedar post that read, "Private property, access denied to HOA. Trespassers will regret it." It faced directly toward the former HOA clubhouse. Rumor has it Karen can still see that sign from her cell window at the county correctional facility. Not that I'd know. I'm too busy working my land, living my life, and minding my damn business, something she never learned to do.